Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Super Destronaut DX, the latest in a series of retro space shooters from Petite Games. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Super Destronaut DX recently released on all major current platforms. It's a fun Space Invaders inspired shooter. What I mean by that, well, let's just jump in and I'll show you. So as you start the game up, you have a little tutorial in the bottom left, but really that's unnecessary as the gameplay kind of speaks for itself. So it's a Space Invaders inspired fixed shooter where we're locked to the bottom of the screen, but we have the ability to move left and right and also shoot at the enemy waves that appear above us. So they form in a grid pattern, and our goal is to, well, not get hit and try and destroy all the waves as quickly as we can. Each different enemy has its own shot type, so some will just fire straight down, some will fire in a wave pattern, some will fire a two-way shot, and some will fire rockets. There also happens to be, not always, but often, you'll have an orange enemy at the top of the waves, where if you destroy that enemy, you'll be given a power-up. There are a total of 4 different power-ups that we can obtain. There's the triple shot, the rocket, the laser, and the bomb. Out of all of those, my personal favorite happens to be the laser. I just love a weapon that can quickly slice through all the enemies, but they all have their different advantages. There is a moment of slowdown when you obtain said weapon, so you definitely know when you've destroyed that and you've got your special weapon, and it'll be highlighted in the top right if you're not 100% sure what you've got next to your life. The enemies that fire rockets, it is possible to go and shoot those rockets down. Some enemies, when they're defeated, will become gray ones, basically ghosts that are falling towards you that we want to avoid, as if they hit us, it will mean a loss of life. And you might have noticed, but in the background as well, there are the gray ones, these ghosts, moving along the surface, and if those happen to hit us, we will also lose a life. So that's something to keep in mind. So the orange power-up enemies won't always be present in every wave, so that can sometimes add a little bit of difficulty to defeating some of those waves, especially if the enemies that are present happen to take more hits to defeat, as not all enemies have the same HP value. And that's basically what we have here in Super Destronaut DX, as far as the classic mode is concerned at least. There are different gameplay modes that we can be playing it in. As we defeat an enemy, though, one thing that's important to note is we increase our multiplier. It just continually increases at 0.1 for every enemy defeated, unless we either take a loss of life, we get shot, or we happen to not destroy an enemy for 3 seconds, and that will also reset the multiplier. Most of the time your playthroughs in classic mode will go pretty quickly, so it's easy game to just pick up, jump right in, play some rounds, and then move on to something else. So as far as the pick up and play aspect is concerned, this game is great for that. So this time we got the rockets. These ones will home in towards the enemies. It's a little bit slow as far as how quickly you can take out waves with it, but it's nice as you can just park yourself in one corner of the map and just like blow away all the enemies without too much effort. So let's go ahead and take some intentional deaths, and we'll show some of the other modes that are available in the game. One of the things that I really like about the classic mode is it's just always pushing you to achieve a newer high score, so always playing to survive longer and longer and end up with a higher score. But one of the really unique and interesting modes I feel this game has is challenges. Challenges, you basically have this set of 30 different challenges where you're trying to complete certain goals. So for the very first challenge, our goal is to reach 10,000 points. So to more easily do that, what we want to do is destroy the enemies as quickly as we can so we keep our multiplier building, as well as not take any life loss. And with a successful first wave, we are basically done with that challenge. So moving on to the second challenge, we've got kill 40 enemies, and it keeps on progressing like that. So it's a really fun mode for this kind of shoot 'em up, giving you those kind of goal-oriented gameplay modes is a great hallmark, I feel, of modern gaming, and so it's great to see that used with a retro-inspired shoot-'em-up. One of the downsides, though, as you continue to play through the challenges, they get progressively harder and harder, as they should. But the waves are always random when you're playing classic mode, time attack, hardcore mode. It's always the same, or well, not like the same, but you get what I'm like saying, right? The patterns are always random, and that can be a problem. Some of the challenges require certain sets of patterns or certain things to happen, and if they don't, then you might actually be unable to complete a challenge on a run, even if everything else is going perfectly. An example, some of the runs are asking you to hit the gray ones as they're falling a certain number of times, but what in a certain amount of time as well. But what if none of the enemies become gray ones as you defeat them? That randomness really hurts the challenges, as sometimes a challenge will just be completely unbeatable. So there's that issue. Time attack, really straightforward. You have a minute and 30 to score as many points as you possibly can. So to do this, we would want to, if we happen to be fortunate enough to have an orange enemy, we want to get the power up as quickly as possible so we can go and wipe through the waves as quickly as possible. You want to be careful not to let your multiplier drop as well, otherwise you're just not going to get as high of a score. And the final mode, the hardcore mode, is basically just your high-skilled challenge mode, where you're trying to last as long as possible with the game's difficulty ratcheted up to max. You have one life, the enemies are firing far more frequently than they do in the other standard modes. And the higher score you can set in that mode, it really feels like an achievement when you've been able to go and get a new personal best in that mode. So I do like jumping into that one from time to time, but really for me it's all about the classic mode for this game, as it's just a classic great shoot 'em up. So moving on to my thoughts on the game, minus flavors. So as I mentioned, I'm not a fan of the randomness in regards to the challenge mode. I would have liked it if they made the challenge mode a little more curated, where there were certain waves that you would always encounter and you had to go and solve the puzzle of how to complete the challenge with those waves, rather than just hoping for good RNG to come your way to complete the challenges. There's also those gray ones on the ground. It's problematic enough, especially when the difficulty starts to ramp up, to avoid the enemy shots. Having to worry about these ghosts on the ground that might potentially run into you is not something that I'm really looking for. And then there's the color choice. These pinkish purple enemies happen to fire their zigzaggy shots, but they're close enough in color to the background that oftentimes I lose them in the background and accidentally, well, I guess it's not necessarily an accident if they're looking to shoot me, but I get shot by those particular enemies without meaning to. But plus flavors, the game itself is just addictively fun. It's got a really easy pick up and play style, and one of the great things about this kind of shoot 'em up is you're competing against the leaderboard. You're always trying to one more round, just pushing yourself to get a higher score, and I love that. It's also, if you're looking for achievements or like trophies, this game's trophy list is ridiculously easy. So it's a quick like platinum or a quick full set of achievements. So if you're into that, that's also something that you might be able to find with this game if you're playing it on Steam, the PlayStation Network, or the Xbox One. Since that doesn't exist on the Nintendo storefront, well then, there's not like that, unfortunately. But for the most part, especially given the low price point and just how fun it is, I can heartily recommend Super Destronaut DX. Alright, well, there we have it. Super Destronaut DX served up for your enjoyment. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.